Here's what's coming up on The World Today. The pressure mounts for countries to evacuate thousands from Afghanistan as the Taliban says there will be no shift in the August 31st deadline. As leaders prepare to discuss the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan on Tuesday, Britain's Defense Secretary says troops will leave when the U.S. troops leave. Plus, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration gives full approval for Pfizer 2-dose COVID-19 vaccine. A warm welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Adegoke in Lagos. We continue to monitor the evacuations going on in Kabul's airport as aircraft after aircraft is airlifting foreigners and Kabul citizens who have the right documentation out of the country following the Taliban takeover. The U.S. Central Command, which oversees the war in Afghanistan, put out a statement a while ago on a gun battle that happened earlier today, saying no U.S. or coalition forces were hurt during a brief exchange of gunfire. The incident, it says, began when an unknown person opened fire on Afghan troops. The Afghans returned fire, and in keeping with their rights of self-defense, the U.S. and coalition troops did too.
The firefight earlier today involving Western forces erupted at Kabul airport when Afghan guards exchanged fire with unidentified gunmen. This is according to Germany's military, which added that it added to the evacuation chaos as thousands of Afghans and foreigners flocked to the airport hoping to catch a flight out. One person was killed in today's clash, but 20 people have been killed in the chaos at the airport, most in shootings and stampedes in the heat and dust, penned in by concrete glass walls. U.S.-led forces aim to complete their pullout by the end of the month. Their aim is to get U.S. citizens and at-risk Afghans to safety out of Afghanistan. Also trying to get out are EU delegation staff who've been at the airport. French Special Forces, in coordination with U.S. forces, gathered 260 members of the EU delegation, which represents the European Union in foreign countries, and brought them to Kabul airport and the French embassy waiting zone before they were airlifted. Many more Afghans are choosing to leave by road, heading to land borders. Those who crossed over to Pakistan say they were facing hardship back home following the Taliban takeover of the country. Pakistan is home to 1.4 million Afghan refugees, while Iran hosts nearly 1 million, according to data from the UN Refugee Agency from the beginning of the year. But the number of undocumented Afghans in both countries is estimated to be much higher.
Security expert David Otto joins us now from London for more on this. Thank you so much, David, for speaking to us. Do you think there was more to the gunfire this morning than security forces are letting on, perhaps not to cause any more anxiety?
Perhaps, yes, as you rightly said. I think, this has been the routine since the Taliban were given authority to control the perimeter out of the airport. The U.S. is now in charge only of the perimeters, that's the inside of the airport. The outside is controlled by Afghan forces, some of them that, are linked to the U.S. forces, but also, more importantly, by the Taliban. And the unknown gunmen being mentioned in that report is in reference to the Taliban. Now, what is going on, as your reporter rightly said, is that many people have died as a result of either gunshots being fired, outside the airport, or as a result of trying to get out of Afghanistan through the Hamid Karzai airport as quickly as possible. You can imagine the chaos that is being experienced at this one airport. Everybody wants to leave. So this is going to be a huge investigation, perhaps in the months to come, by the U.S. Senate Committee on Intelligence, to really find out what really went wrong, that you had a U.S. evacuation, gone wrong. Of course, you don't withdraw your troops, from a country without actually making sure that you've withdrawn, most of your key nationals, especially Afghans who were working with the U.S. government as interpreters. So there is more to come. But the key here is that the Taliban is trying to delay the U.S. Evacuation procedures so that they can say to the world that the U.S. has not been able to meet to the deadline of August the 31st. So to give the U.S. a bad image. This is where all this is going.
Well, speaking about withdrawal of troops, the UK intends to convince the US to extend the troops' stay in Afghanistan beyond August 31st, but the Taliban does not want foreign forces to remain in the country beyond that date. What do you think could happen here if foreign forces flout the Taliban warning?
It will show that, the US does not, have an estimate in terms of how it carries out this evacuation. That is what the Taliban wants to happen, because for them, what they've been doing recently is to block some of the routes that are leading to Kaza Airport, so that most of the people that will be evacuated, especially those that are afraid of their lives, will not use that route. So the Taliban understands that, and they are making sure that they are delaying the process. Now, of course, the number of people that are present, U.S. nationals, Afghans that have worked. You can imagine the scale. We're talking about an entire government where many people are afraid that, because they've worked for the NATO or the US or the Afghan government, they are now, a threat, to the Taliban regime. So a lot of people want to leave the airport, leave Afghanistan through just this one airport. So there's going to be a delay, obviously, and the Taliban is going to use that as a propaganda to say, listen, you don't meet up, with your deadlines, and therefore, you cannot say that it's only the Taliban. That doesn't match with action. So this is the aim, I believe that the Taliban is working towards.
Well, it's clear the leaders have to think about the future at this time of Afghanistan. I mean, there's a G7 meeting slated for tomorrow. What should, leaders discuss, and what should be the solution?
I think the solution is, to find ways for these G7 governments to work with whether it's going to be a purely Taliban government as it was in 2001, or it's going to be a power-sharing government. But what is very clear, the Taliban is facing a very strong opposition from the Panjshir, village, the valley they call it, which is one of the provinces that the Taliban has not been able to take over. Now, this, they call it the Resistance Front. It is led by the first Vice President, Umrullah Saleh, but also Ahmad Massoud, the son of one of the anti-Taliban fighters who died in 2001. So the Taliban is still not very comfortable. And, I think what is going to happen is that these leaders have to really look at various ways of working with the Taliban. But I'm afraid that what is going to happen is the U.S. might use this resistance front, to hold the Taliban to account, because they're already calling for the U.S., to sponsor them with arms and ammunition. So, let's see what happens in the next couple of days and weeks.
See what happens. I mean, 31st of August is 8 days away. Thank you so much, security expert David Otto.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Britain's Defense Secretary Ben Wallace says his country has hours now, not weeks, to evacuate people from Afghanistan, and that troops would leave the Kabul airport when the U.S. withdraw troops on August 31st.
Well, the Prime Minister is obviously at G7 going to try and raise the prospect of seeing if the United States will extend. It's really important for people to understand the United States have over 6,000 people in Kabul airport, and when they withdraw, that will take away the framework that has allowed us to withdraw, and we will have to go as well. I don't think there is any likelihood on staying on after the United States. If their timetable extends even by a day or two, then that will give us a day or two more to evacuate people, because we are really down to hours now, not weeks, and we have to make sure we exploit every minute to get people out. Over the last 24 hours, we've taken 1,300 people out. That's a mixture of British nationals and people on the ARAP scheme, such as interpreters. We've taken out, since the 14th of August, 6,600 of those people and other people within criteria. And since as far back as April, we've taken out 8,000 people. Those are all the people within the scheme, both passport holders, interpreters, people that help the British government, whether that was through aid or whether that was through military. And that's the right thing to do. There are, of course, many, many more, and that the hardest thing is to be honest about the reality, which is we won't get them all out, but we are doing it every hour of every day to get them through.
Well, the UK insists evacuation efforts will continue as long as it is safe to do so, and has deployed 5 more workers to the airport and to aid efforts. There are now 19 British personnel working on the ground, including Ambassador Sir Laurie Bristow, who has been praised for remaining at the airport and aiding his team in processing visa applications. In the meantime, G7 leaders are holding an emergency meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation in Afghanistan. This was agreed following talks between the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and US President Joe Biden. Let's talk now to our London correspondent, Juliana Olayinka, about the developments. Juliana, we've heard the Defense Secretary talk about UK troops withdrawing just as the Americans are leaving. Therefore, evacuations will be more rushed. Is there a fear that the British forces will not be able to hold up against the Taliban when the US troops withdraw?
Good evening, Lo. Yes, it is a fear. In fact, I don't think there was any question of a doubt that the US withdrawal would leave British troops, because if we cast our minds back 20 years ago now, when the former Labour leader, the former Prime Minister Tony Blair, stood side by side with George Bush, it was all about supporting America. It was initially America's war on terror. Of course, it became a global war, and Britain have been taken by surprise. Not only have they got about 6,000 troops, well, the US, around Kabul airport, they're obviously providing the operations, the surveillance. As soon as that's pulled out, Britain are exposed. There has been some suggestions that behind the scenes, the British Foreign Ministry did try to kind of rally together some sort of coalition amongst EU members that would be working alongside NATO and Canada to put some troops on the ground, but the political will is just not there. The strength of the Afghan operation lies in the heart of America. So once that's gone, as we already heard from Ben Wallace, so too will the British troops be gone.
Well, G7 leaders are meeting tomorrow to discuss the developments. Apparently, this meeting is being spearheaded by the British Prime Minister himself. His office says both he and President Biden have agreed on the need for the global community to come together to prevent a humanitarian crisis. With your ears to the ground, have you heard what the other leaders attending the meeting, as well as the Prime Minister, think as a more realistic plan for dealing with this situation on the ground in Afghanistan?
It's all very, very fluid. There's been some briefings over the past couple of minutes from the Pentagon. Again, you know, you're talking about this humanitarian catastrophe. It's already unfolding, isn't it? And the only thing is, this August 31st deadline isn't a new deadline. This was put in place 18 months ago, handed over by former President Donald Trump to Joe Biden, who's stuck with it. It was only a couple of months ago that G7 leaders were whining and dining in Cornwall. Was this not discussed then? That's a major topic of discussion, because yes, everybody's talking about this taking people by surprise, but this should have been no surprise. You know, this discussion should have taken place, but there will be an emergency discussion tomorrow, as you said. It will be spearheaded by Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Of course, lots of discussions is ongoing and been taking place behind the scenes. But this is a big moment for Britain, not just America, but for Britain also, because Boris Johnson has been, waving the flag of global Britain and its massive agenda. But what does it say about the agenda now if it cannot stay in Kabul without the support of America? As I was saying before, it doesn't appear as if the political will from any of the other leaders is there. So we'll just have to wait and see, Lo. But as you said, I've got my ears to the ground.
All right, then. Thank you, Juliana.
Thanks, Lo.
We have more stories coming up after the break on the program. Plus, something to cheer the world. Colombia's Medellin returns to full bloom for the flower festival. Welcome back to the program. While the Biden administration continues to stave criticism of U.S. troops' withdrawal from Afghanistan, Vice President Kamala Harris is in Singapore. Earlier today, she the Changi Naval Base and toured the USS Tulsa combat ship. Singapore is not a U.S. treaty ally, but remains one of its strongest security partners in the region with deep trade ties. However, it also seeks to balance its relationships with the United States and China by not taking sides.
Our presence in the Indo-Pacific has a long, long history, including now, of helping to guarantee peace and security, freedom of trade and commerce, freedom of navigation. I'm going to say that again. Freedom of navigation and open waterways, and the rules-based international order that has brought so much safety and prosperity to so many. It is in our vital interest to stand united with our allies and our partners in Southeast Asia in defense of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Free and open. Again, this is the work you are doing every day. Policy people talk about it, foreign policy people talk about it. We talk about it in diplomatic meetings. Free and open. This is the work you all are doing. And may God bless you.
At least 21 people have been killed, with 20 more reported missing as Storm Henry hits parts of the U.S. state of Tennessee. Record rainfall of up to 17 inches in some areas and sparking massive flooding on Saturday afternoon and evening. The flooding uprooted massive trees, tore through homes and tossed cars and pickup trucks into ditches and atop sheds and other structures. The governor says there will be mostly recovery efforts from now on.
There's been a record number of inches of rainfall over Friday night and Saturday morning that created devastating flooding in this community. Tremendous loss of life, a number of missing people on the ground, homes washed off their foundations, cars strewn around the community. It is a devastating picture of loss and heartache. Our hearts and our prayers need to be for those communities, for those folks in that community, many of them who have suffered not only the loss of their homes and their property, but the loss of family members and friends. Well, the difference, of course, for this particular flood is the record level of flooding. I think we received about 15 inches of rain in a 12-hour period of time. Not sure about that particular number, but close to that, which is very different than flooding we've had before. But I'm sure there will be assessments after the fact. What happened, how it happened. Are there ways that we can look to mitigate this going forward? But right now we know this is a result of a record flood, like that community has not seen before with regard to the amount of rainfall.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has given full approval to Pfizer's 2-dose COVID-19 vaccine, becoming the first jab to be licensed in the United States. The vaccine had initially been given emergency use authorization. Its 2 jabs, 3 weeks apart, are now fully approved for those aged 16 and older. The approval is expected to set off more vaccine mandates by employers and organizations across the country. It comes amid lingering vaccine hesitancy among many Americans. Well, here's more from around the world in our COVID-19 Global Update.
India's drug regulator has granted emergency use approval for Zydus Cadila's COVID-19 vaccine. It's said to be the world's first DNA shot against the coronavirus in adults and children aged 12 years and above. The approval gives a boost to India's vaccination program, which aims to inoculate all eligible adults by December and will provide the first shot for those under 18, as the country still struggles to contain the virus spread in some states.
Very good vaccine, world-class vaccine, and it is appreciated that in a record time where we need this vaccine urgently to prevent the emergence of third wave, particularly in the children. So this vaccine would be used in all children above the age of 12. And this vaccine is different from the earlier vaccine, that this has used the plasmid form of the DNA, which is like other vaccines where you have different platforms, RNA vaccine or other vaccines.
The vaccine, ZyCoV-D, uses a section of genetic material from the virus that gives instructions as either DNA or RNA to make the specific protein that immune system recognizes and responds to.
But once you get to 70%,
Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the country must begin to ease strict COVID-19 restrictions once it reaches higher vaccination rates, as more than half of Australians have been enduring long lockdowns to contain a Delta outbreak.
and we must adjust our mindset. Cases will not be the issue once we get above 70%. Dealing with serious illness, hospitalisation, ICU capabilities, our ability to respond in those circumstances, that will be our goal. And we will live with this virus as we live with other infectious diseases. That's what the national plan is all about, was always about. That's how we designed it, and that's how it needs to be implemented.
Daily cases have topped 800 for the last 3 days in New South Wales, with most of the cases detected in Sydney, the state capital. On Monday, 818 cases were reported, most of them in Sydney, slightly down from the record 830 a day earlier. Soldiers have been deployed on the streets in Vietnam, in the Ho Chi Minh City, to help enforce a strict lockdown in the country's biggest urban area and the current epicenter of its worst coronavirus outbreak to date. After managing to contain COVID-19 for much of last year, Vietnam has recorded a total of 348,000 infections and at least 8,277 fatalities. Most of those cases have been recorded in Ho Chi Minh City and its surrounding industrial provinces, where the Delta variant of the virus has sent numbers soaring since late April. The World Health Organization says the cumulative total of global COVID-19 cases have exceeded 211.37 million, with a death toll surpassing 4.42 million as of Monday. Specifically, there had been 211 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, including 4.4 million deaths. As of August 20th, a total of 4,562,256,778 vaccine doses had been administered worldwide.
And now to our feel-good story, and hoping this one adds some color to your day. The Colombian city of Medellin came into full bloom Sunday with scores of florists descending on the city's stadium for a colorful flower festival with a local twist. Celebrating the art of floristry, flower aficionados marched on the stadium's grounds to show off elaborate floral arrangements, or siletas as they're locally known. Many of the arrangements drew inspiration from the pandemic, with the traditional parade called off in 2020 due to coronavirus. The annual flower parade reportedly harks back to 1957, when a Medellin local invited florists from nearby villages to march in the city to display their colorful arrangements. More than 60 years on, the humble parade has evolved to become a prized event on Colombia's cultural calendar, with florists going all out on their siletas. With Medellin dubbed Colombia's city of eternal spring, locals in Colombia's second city hope the flower fair will go some way to restoring the image of the city that is sometimes better known internationally for Pablo Escobar and drug trafficking.
Muy buenas tardes.
And that's it on the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.